You've probably heard the word tariffs thrown around a lot lately. Most of us hear that word and immediately think, this sounds like something boring economists argue about over spreadsheets. Here's the thing though, tariffs aren't just some background noise in politics. They can shape the price of your groceries, your job security, even whether that new iPhone costs $1,200 or $1,800. And Trump? He's not playing small. He's betting big on tariffs, again. And if he wins, the economic map could flip. Some people say it's genius. Others say it's economic suicide. So in this video, we're breaking down what tariffs actually are, what Trump's planning, and whether this whole strategy could save the economy or wreck it. Before we get into the drama of trade wars and Trump's tariff master plan, let's clear one thing up. What even is a tariff? A tariff is basically a tax that one country puts on goods coming in from another country. That's it. So let's say an American company wants to import cars from Japan. If the US government slaps a 25% tariff on imported vehicles, that company now has to pay 25% more just to bring those cars into the US. And guess what? They're not going to eat that cost out of kindness. They'll just raise the price for you, the buyer, so you feel that tariff whether you know it or not. And tariffs come in different flavors. The most common ones are import tariffs, which tax goods coming into a country. Less common are export tariffs, which tax goods leaving a country, but those are usually used in rare situations like resource shortages. Now, why do countries even bother with tariffs? Well, the idea is that by making foreign products more expensive, you're encouraging people to buy local instead. So it's like giving homegrown industries a bit of a boost, like saying, hey, don't buy that cheap imported steel, buy American. It's called protectionism, and it's been around forever. In fact, the US used heavy tariffs way back in the 1800s to build up its own industries when it was still getting on its feet. So on the surface, tariffs sound kind of patriotic, right? Protect local jobs, boost your own economy, keep foreign competitors in check. But as with anything in economics, there's a catch. Because while tariffs can help in some ways, they can also trigger some serious backlash. And Trump? He's betting big that the pros outweigh the cons. So now that we know what tariffs are, let's talk about why Trump's bringing them back and what he's actually planning. Let's rewind real quick. Back in 2018, Trump slapped tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, 25% and 10% respectively. Why? He said it was about national security, that the US was too dependent on foreign metals, especially from countries like China. That move kicked off what people started calling a trade war, mainly with China, but it also hit allies like Canada and the EU. Trump hit over $360 billion worth of Chinese goods with tariffs, ranging from electronics to toys to machinery. China obviously fired back with their own tariffs on US exports like soybeans and pork. It's all under the umbrella of what he calls America First economics. The idea is to protect US companies from unfair competition, especially from countries where labor is cheap or government subsidies give foreign firms an advantage. So, to be clear, Trump sees tariffs not just as taxes, but as leverage, a bargaining chip. Tariffs get a lot of backlash, and we'll definitely talk about the downsides, but first, let's look at why some people, including Trump, believe tariffs can actually help the US economy. First up, protecting domestic industries. Let's say a US steel company is competing with cheap imported steel from, say, China or India. That foreign steel is often cheaper not because it's better, but because it's heavily subsidized by the foreign government or produced under lower labor standards. So American companies get undercut. Now slap a tariff on those foreign imports. Suddenly that Chinese steel gets more expensive. That's what Trump was aiming for back in 2018, and for a while, it kind of worked. The US steel industry saw a temporary boost. In fact, according to the US Commerce Department, the steel industry added about 1,000 to 1,500 jobs in the year after the tariffs kicked in. Tariffs also bring in government revenue. In 2019 alone, tariff revenues jumped to over $79 billion, which is a big jump from pre-trade war levels. And finally, tariffs can help national security. That might sound dramatic, but think about it. If your country is 100% reliant on foreign nations for critical resources, like steel, semiconductors, or medical supplies, you're vulnerable. Tariffs can encourage domestic production of those essentials, so the US isn't left scrambling if, say, another pandemic hits or a major conflict disrupts supply chains. So yeah, tariffs can actually be a powerful tool, if used correctly. Okay, now let's flip the coin, because for every pro, there's a con. Let's start with the most obvious one: higher prices for consumers. When the government slaps a tariff on imported goods, those goods become more expensive to bring into the country. Companies aren't going to just absorb that cost out of kindness. They pass it straight to you. For example, after Trump's tariffs on washing machines in 2018, the average price for a washer rose by about $86 and dryers jumped too. Tariffs on components like steel or microchips drive up costs across entire supply chains. That means everything from cars to computers gets more expensive. Now multiply that across thousands of products and you've got inflation pressure. In fact, economists from the New York Fed estimated that U.S. consumers and businesses were paying an extra $1.4 billion per month because of tariffs by mid-2019. Next up, retaliation. When the U.S. imposes tariffs on another country, they hit back. And in Trump's case, China hit back hard. They targeted U.S. exports like soybeans, pork, dairy, and even whiskey, basically industries tied to American farmers and manufacturers. Suddenly, U.S. farmers couldn't sell to one of their biggest customers. Exports fell, prices dropped, and farms started losing money. The government had to step in with a $28 billion bailout just to keep farms afloat. And that leads to another problem: job losses. While some industries gained jobs under tariffs, others lost them. According to a Moody's Analytics report, the trade war may have resulted in 300,000 fewer jobs than would have existed without the tariffs. Why? Because when exports drop and costs rise, businesses start cutting. Another overlooked downside: supply chain disruptions. A lot of American businesses rely on global suppliers to stay competitive. We're not just importing finished goods, we're importing parts, raw materials, electronics. When tariffs hit those components, businesses either pay more or scramble to find new suppliers. And small businesses, they don't have the luxury of absorbing or adapting quickly. Many just raised prices or shut down. And finally, there's the global credibility issue. When the US imposes broad, unpredictable tariffs, even on allies, it can damage relationships. So to sum it up, tariffs might help protect some industries, but they also risk raising prices, losing jobs, damaging exports, and isolating the US from global supply chains. That's the gamble.
Raise 50,000.
50 isn't enough. I'm all in.
It wasn't just the US and China either. The European Union also got caught in the crossfire, especially Germany, which exports a lot of industrial goods to the US. In response, the EU slapped retaliatory tariffs on American products like motorcycles, bourbon, and even Levi's jeans. And while this was all playing out, the World Trade Organization, WTO, basically the global referee for trade disputes, wasn't impressed. The WTO ruled that some of the US tariffs violated international trade rules. Other countries filed formal complaints, and suddenly, America, once the champion of free trade, was being seen as the disruptor. Now let's talk about the impact on the global economy. When the world's two largest economies go at it with tariffs, markets get shaky. By the end of 2019, the IMF estimated the trade war shaved off about 0.8% from global GDP growth, which may not sound like much, but in a $90 trillion global economy, that's hundreds of billions of dollars lost. So yeah, tariffs don't just live in a vacuum. They create shockwaves that ripple through global markets, relationships, and supply chains. And when the US throws the first punch, the world punches back. So in the end, tariffs don't create clear winners and losers. They create a mess of trade-offs. Some jobs come back, others vanish, some prices rise, others stabilize, some industries grow, others shrink. And that's why the debate gets so heated, because it's not black and white. It's red ink for some, green numbers for others. All right, by now you've seen the good, the bad, and the complicated when it comes to tariffs. But what do the actual experts think? Most mainstream economists argue that tariffs hurt more than they help, especially over the long term. That's not a political opinion. It's based on numbers, models, and real-world outcomes. Take the Peterson Institute for International Economics, for example. Their analysis of Trump's trade war estimated that American consumers were paying the vast majority of the cost, not China. In other words, despite the rhetoric that China's paying the tariffs, the data showed that U.S. importers and consumers were footing the bill. Then you've got research from the New York Federal Reserve, which found that the 2018 to 2019 tariffs raised prices for American businesses and households and didn't lead to higher wages or significantly more jobs in the targeted industries. Not all economists think tariffs are evil. Some heterodox economists and those with a more protectionist or nationalist economic lens argue that short-term pain may be worth long-term gain, especially when it comes to rebuilding U.S. manufacturing.
The good news is more jobs in manufacturing, and we all know that manufacturing really is the lifeblood of any successful economy. So this is good news for America.
So let's talk about
Countries like South Korea and Japan used strategic tariffs and subsidies to build up their industries decades ago. So the idea isn't without precedent. Even within Trump's own administration, there were split views. His trade advisor, Peter Navarro, was all in on tariffs, calling them necessary to protect American workers. But other officials, including some in the Treasury Department, were concerned about market volatility and retaliation. The consensus? There really isn't one. But if you had to summarize what most economists agree on, it's this. Tariffs can protect, but they also isolate. They can spark short-term gains, but often lead to long-term costs. In other words, tariffs are a blunt tool, and like any blunt tool, they're most effective when used carefully, sparingly, and with a clear strategy. If applied carefully and as part of a broader strategy, tariffs can protect key sectors and push for fairer trade. But if used too broadly, too fast, or for political optics, they can backfire and hurt the very people they're meant to help. Whether you agree with it or not, it's a high-stakes play that could shape prices, jobs, and global power for years to come. So, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Have you noticed prices rising where you live? Do you think tariffs should be used more or less? Drop your thoughts below and let's get a real conversation going. So if you got value from this, give it a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown.